What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Alexander, the voice in the void, the lone wolf, your favorite host with a lisp. Welcome to another episode of the Twee'quel podcast. I'm so very happy that you decided to hang out with us today. If this is your first time, check out any of the old episodes. I'm pretty sure you'll find something to keep you entertained and informed. And if you've been rocking with us for a while, thank you very much for coming over to YouTube and hanging out with us. I truly appreciate it. I say that all the time. I don't care if it's 1, 5, 10, 100, or 1,000 of you. I thank every single one of you that decided to hang out with me on this pokey little podcast. We got a pretty short show today. We're going to take care of some news, and then we're going to talk about that last episode of X-Men 97 because wow, right? Just wow. The show in general is just wow. But that last episode, a couple of things I never thought I'd actually see in either movie or TV form, and it happens. But we're going to talk about that. And as a matter of fact, if you want to see my live reaction to it, watching it for the first time, I'm going to link it up right here. Hopefully it'll be up there, and then you can watch it and see exactly how I reacted when it actually went off. But before we get into that, let's get to the news. So leading off our news today, we're going to talk about the passing of Bernard Hill. Now, the name may not be familiar, but I guarantee the face and the voice will be. Now, he's done the voice for Sir Walter Beck in Fable 3, and he's also the captain in the movie Titanic back in 1997. But most of us, probably the vast majority of us, remember that he played Theoden, the King of Rohan, in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, he passed away on May 5th. There has been no word about what actually caused his death. It's just another person from our collective enjoyment that has gone. Bernard Hill was only 79 years old. At the box office, number one in the theaters over the past weekend was Fall Guy, the Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt film. Now, the fact that that one was number one is not really the story. Number three, oddly enough, was Challengers. It fell hard and fast, losing about 70% of its take from its opening weekend. The number two movie is the one that I want to talk about. It's the re-release, the 2024 re-release of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, coming in at number two over the past weekend worldwide. That, to me, honestly, is a total shock. You're talking about an older movie being re-released now and just running right to number two. If it had hit number one, I wouldn't have been surprised considering it was number two now. Kung Fu Panda has finally also passed $500 million this week. And coming out this weekend, over this new weekend, it will be the new film, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I want to say this is maybe the sixth or seventh movie in the entire run of it, even with the older movies and the newer ones put together. Might actually be number 8, come to think about it. But I actually do want to see it. Planet of the Apes has always been a really weird type of IP for me, but I still want to actually watch it. So after I go see it, maybe we'll talk about it. In Marvel news, they've decided that they're going to reduce the output of properties that they do, not only in theaters, but also on Disney Plus. Now, they said they're only going to do 2 to 3 movies a year, and they're only going to do 1 or maybe 2 shows a year moving forward with their new plan. Now, to me, that is a good thing because that means they're focusing more on quality instead of quantity, which the quality actually kind of fell off because they were trying to do so much and to create content for Disney Plus. So if they're going away from that, that's a good thing in my opinion. Now, DC is basically doing the exact same thing. DC hired James Gunn and Peter Safran. They hit the reset button. Pretty much everybody's out. They're bringing in all new people, starting with Superman, what was Superman Legacy, and now just titled Superman. So it looks like Marvel is going to do the same thing. And if you remember me from a few months ago, I said the exact same thing. Marvel needs to hit the reset button, and Kevin Feige has said himself that they're pretty much doing a soft reset of everything at Marvel, not just the MCU in general, but everything that Marvel is putting out, they're hitting a soft reset button. And the good thing about that is we may actually get to see things that we thought we'd never see because they're taking their time and redoing everything. So the more time they have to do things in between them, then that means the quality will be better. And that's a guaranteed sign that they are going to take a lot more of this seriously instead of just putting out things one after another. Now, also from Marvel, over the past week, we've had a slew of hirings for the MCU. Now, we talked about Giancarlo Esposito last week, but now this week, we've actually gotten 3 new hires, and one of them is huge because now we actually know who's going to play Galactus for the upcoming Fantastic Four film movie, and his name is Ralph Ineson. Now, the name might sound just slightly familiar to a couple of you, and I'll tell you who actually that is because you're actually going to know who he is in a second. Now, not only did they hire him, but they also hired John Malkovich for an untitled role thus far. it's John Malkovich. Whatever he plays is going to be good. Now, Ralph Ineson, this won't be his first time in the MCU. He actually played an unnamed Ravager pilot in the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. So this will be his second go round, but this time he'll actually have a name to his character, which is actually pretty cool. Now, Ralph Ineson playing Galactus, he's a great actor. Now, it depends not so much on his acting, how this gets received, but how they portray Galactus. If they go with the whole CGI cloud thing, but just have his voice, it's going to get a big thumbs down, from not just from me, but from every single person involved. So let's just hope they actually do something good this time. And we want to actually see the big purple guy with the giant helmet show up on planet Earth. Hey, you've shown us giant things show up on the Earth with the Eternals. They can do the same thing for Galactus. Now, this next piece of news is not Marvel, but it's Marvel adjacent. Now, Disney and WB have announced that they are going to partner for a new streaming bundle service. I had no idea that this was a thing, but apparently Disney and Warner Brothers are going to share a streaming service where you will have Disney. It would be moored, I should say, by Disney, Disney Plus, Hulu, and what used to be HBO Max and now just called Max. So all three of those will be in a bundle going forward. Now, to me, that just sounds like the return of cable, right? Think about all that stuff that all three of those streaming sites have, and they're going to be mashed together, and you get all of that for one price. Now, the price point hasn't been announced, but I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere in the region of 30 to 33 bucks a month, because that will be pretty much what you would pay for all three of those with no ads, right? So you'll probably get a tier for ads and a tier for no ads, and then you'll get all three of them. But either way, this is pretty much just us going back to cable, except we're not paying, the exorbitant amount for it. But whatever it is, I'm with it, because if you can get more for less money being paid, I'm all for it. So we're going to end the news today talking about Sony doing the moonwalk. Now, what I mean by that is, over the past week, Sony has gotten into a little bit of trouble with a lot of their fan bases for their game Helldivers. They were telling most of the people on Steam and other platforms outside of PlayStation, if you don't have a PlayStation Network account, you're going to have to get one to keep playing Helldivers and a couple of other games. Well, those people started throwing out massive criticisms over the past week, and even getting off of Steam and just not playing the game and uninstalling it. Sony figured out that they were doing that, and they didn't want no part of it. Sony actually said that they were losing close to $250 million every 3 to 4 days because players were no longer playing the game, and they were moving away from other Sony properties as well. So Sony backtracked, and I mean they backtracked hard, and they said, hey, guess what, dude? I know we were talking about it, and I know we said it at first, but you don't have to get a PlayStation account. You don't have to join PlayStation Network to keep playing the game, so you can get back on. And then people clap their hands. Now, here's the other thing about that I want you to keep in mind. Not only does that work for video game companies like Sony and all of their video games, this is the second and third time we've actually seen this type of tactic work from the fan perspective. Remember what happened with the very first Sonic movie when they put out the images of what Sonic was supposed to look like into that movie going forward? There was such a backlash that the writers and the designers for that movie went back and redid 90% of the movie, especially Sonic's design. And what do we have? All these years later, we're going into the third Sonic movie. It works. That is the way to do it. You don't fight companies by not buying things. You fight them just by the criticism and not buying things. Just don't give them your money. They are only thinking about profits. And if you start cutting into it deep enough, they'll get the picture. Believe me, it works. We've seen this happen time and time again. So we need to stick to that tactic a lot more often. That's all of our news for today. Don't forget to check over on the Instagram page for random things that happen throughout the week. I want to take a break, and when we come back, let's start talking about X-Men 97. So with the death of Gambit, I decided that we needed somebody back here to replace him. And I couldn't think of a better person, especially after this last episode, to replace Gambit than this guy right here, Magneto. And this episode was very much all about Magneto. This was such a good episode. I can't even tell you the fact that it ended the way it ended. I did not believe I would actually ever see that from a comic, either in a movie or in a TV show. And yet here we are. Bo DeMeo and his crew once again did it. I believe me when I tell you that I am as shocked and as pleased with this episode as I have been with every single episode that we've had thus far for X-Men 97. I absolutely love this show. I'm pretty sure everybody does it. If you just, after every episode, you can just see the internet on every social media just explode with talking points and reviews all across the board. It is just a fantastic show. This episode was all about Magneto trying to come to terms with him within himself, just understanding that, hey, if I'm gonna have to be the bad guy, I'm just gonna have to be the bad guy. Him confronting Charles at the lake, carrying asteroid M, which in the original series, after asteroid M was destroyed, it did in fact crash down into the ocean. So he went to pick it back up and he knew exactly where it was, because this obviously follows that original series. Rogue changing sides and running off with Magneto, which she didn't do that in the original series. And in the comic, it was actually Colossus that decided to join him after Asteroid M was destroyed. And following in this storyline, watching Roberto leave Jubilee's side to go join him, I kind of did not see that coming, but watching it, it actually made sense, especially the fact that here is a kid who is new to be having mutant powers and learning how to use them. He never actually officially joined Professor X and the X-Men school. So him saying, hey, my own mother gave me up to these Prime Sentinels. Of course, he's going to run off with Magneto. He doesn't want to be around the X-Men after everything that has happened to him, even if he does love Jubilee and wants to be by her side. So him joining Magneto actually makes all the sense in the world. Just everything that happened, splitting the team up into two, everything that happened with Cable attacking Jean and being controlled by Sinister, everything in this episode was just top notch. Just absolutely top notch. Like I said, tip my hat to Bo DeMeo and his team. This is absolutely fantastic episode. And the fact that this series, and I don't think nobody's actually talked about it, this series is slightly more and slightly more particularly violent than the original X-Men series, and slightly more and particularly more violent for anything that's been on Disney Plus, which is a plus. No pun intended. We actually need more IP like this on Disney Plus. Things for people my age and slightly older than kids. You can always section it off so you don't have the very, very young ones seeing stuff as violent as this, or even more violent. I guess that's why Disney partnered with Hulu and is going to wind up partnering with WB for a new streaming service coming this summer. So, going into the future, if they decide to adapt even more IP from the comics into animated series or even into films, and you have to be slightly more violent, especially with something like Deadpool, which is coming. Don't forget that we do have Deadpool coming. I personally wouldn't put that on Disney Plus. I would actually section that off and stick it on Hulu and say, hey, this is the slightly more adult stuff and over here, and this is the slightly more kid-friendly stuff over here. And that way you can actually have it all and have it sectioned off so you don't have the kids watching all the adult or more adult stuff. Fantastic episode, but the big thing we can talk about today is all the Easter eggs, and there were a lot, and I'm not talking about just from the comics. There were a lot of references to all of the X-Men movies with Fox, everything that's going on in MCU, video game references, obviously comic book references. There were references to Bo DeMeo and his crew, even to artists like Chris Claremont, but we can get into all of those. We have a ton of them to go through, so let's get started. Number one, the episode opened up with the same tagline previously on X-Men, but usually we would hear it from Scott or one of the other team leaders. But this week we actually heard it from Wolverine saying previously on X-Men. Now, yes, indeed, Wolverine has led the X-Men team in the comics a few times, and even on like X-Men Evolutions, he's led the team. But the fact that it did started off with him saying previously on X-Men, and at the end we see him losing that fight in a very particular fashion to Magneto. So that means this entire episode is bookended by Wolverine from the beginning all the way to the end. That's a very good call out and call back, not only to the comics but to the old show and to the other TV series like X-Men Evolution and X-Men First Class. Storm actually returns into the title sequence this week as well, and she has her black outfit like that we see her fighting in this one, crown included. So it was actually good that they threw that in there. In the closing clash of the two teams, remember I said they had never actually changed that, not even from the old episode to the new episode in the opening, where you have the X-Men on one side and the Brotherhood of Mutants, and they come together for the clash. Now they had never changed it until this week, and go back and look at it. The people that are usually in between it with the Sentinels in the back, and the one or two Sentinels in the back, usually those are just regular humans. This week they're Prime Sentinels. So are the Prime Sentinels actually running, or are they actually joining the fight? So we would actually have basically four armies. We would actually have regular humans, mutants, on both sides, and we would have Prime Sentinels. So this is starting to turn into one big, gigantic civil war for planet Earth going on. Xavier actually returns to using his original wheelchair, the same one we see him use at the end of X-Men First Class from the comics. He's sitting in the original wheelchair with his green suit, purple. I want to say it's not purple. It's kind of like a grayish tie, and the Argyle blanket over his lap. That's directly from the comic book. Very good to see that in there. Obviously can't use his the yellow, or I guess you could call it gold, wheelchair that he usually uses, the hover wheelchair, because it's electronic, and Magneto has shut down everything on the planet that's ran by electronics, so obviously he can't use that one. So he's back to using just a regular old wheelchair. I want to say the last time we saw him in that wheelchair was in what was it, the Phoenix, where I want to say the last time we saw it was when Phoenix killed Xavier in the film a few years ago. So it's actually nice to see them actually bring that back. The first photo in the mansion actually has him with the team in that exact same wheelchair. So when you go back and looking at certain episodes and you try to catch some of this stuff, look at the photo that's up on the wall with Xavier and the original First Class of the X-Men hanging on the wall. He's actually sitting in that same wheelchair with the same blanket over his lap and in the exact same suit. So good callback for that. When Beast and Forge finally meet each other after all these years of being apart, that handshake that they do, and then the fact that how they greet each other, being old friends, well, that's reminiscent of how Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers greet each other in the first Predator film. Watching that is such a funny callback. I think I'm probably one of the only people on the planet that caught that, but I'm weird like that. I catch all those little silly things. Cyclops, when they decide that they're going to assault not only Asteroid M, but Bastion on the Galapagos Island, he splits the team up into two teams, blue team and gold team. And now obviously those are the colors of the X-Men, blue and gold, but that is directly from the comic book where Cyclops actually did break them up into blue team and gold team. Now, after that run of them being on blue team and gold team in the comics, that would lead to two different comic book runs running concurrently for the X-Men. You had the blue team in the regular X-Men comics, and you had the gold team in Uncanny X-Men, and the teams that you see in the show are the teams that are in the comic. So I love that too. Gold team actually heads off to the Galapagos Islands. Now, if you remember, the Galapagos Islands in the comics is where Cassandra Nova found that original master mode that was abandoned, that nobody had actually found it. The Galapagos is right off of Ecuador, and she found it in Ecuador, and is where she built, that's where she had Master Mode build that Wild Sentinel that actually attacked Genosha in the comic the exact same way it attacked it in the show. Very good callback. Now, that's one of those few things where if you're not reading the comics, you're going to miss it almost immediately. But obviously, they read the comics a ton, because that's something that a lot of people would have actually missed. We actually get to see Roberto Sunspot actually in his comic book accurate uniform. Not instead of being gold and blue like everybody else's, he's wearing his New Mutants uniform, where all of the New Mutants theirs was this very dark blue and gold, almost black and goldish color. So he's actually finally wearing his costume. But when he goes off with Magneto, he actually flares up his entire power set, and he's just covered in those sunspots, and you actually can't see his uniform, but he's very, very comic book accurate. I mean, down to the curly hair and everything. Absolutely brilliant. When Magneto confronts Xavier at the lake, Asteroid M is floating above him, and he's basically carrying it around, saying that, hey, I'm offering you, just like he did in the comics, just like he did in the show. Everybody's welcome on Asteroid M, even you. If you want to come with me, you can come now. If you look at Asteroid M while it's over his shoulder, there is an Aurora Borealis around the edges of it. Now, the only way that that can actually happen is if it has its own magnetic field, right? So that tells us that if Magneto actually wanted to, he could actually fix everything that's going on in Earth. So if the fact that Magneto can fix it, he knows he can fix it, but he's dooming Earth so that all the humans will die and all the Prime Sentinels can get wiped out, and then mutants can come back down off an asteroid and inherit the Earth. Homo superior. That's what he's always stood for in a lot of the run of the comics, and that's what he's pretty much stood for in the original run of the cartoon. On Muir Island, after the team leaves the mansion and decides to go suit up and get as much gear as they can from their second base on Muir Island, there is a ton of little Easter eggs and little cues that are not just from the comics, but from the old cartoon, the original animated series, but also from other animated series like X-Men Evolutions. So one of the things we see two different Blackbird jets from the original run of this TV series and from X-Men Evolutions. One has the Shi'ar technology on it, which they actually take to space to confront Jean and the Phoenix Force and to meet up with the other Shi'ar. But there's this other one that's kind of flat. This other Blackbird jet that Gold Team winds up actually taking, but it's flat and it's kind of got a long nose. Now this one looks very much like the excuse me, looks like the one from X-Men First Class, the film. Excuse me. So we see both of those. We see two hover chairs, actually. We see the gold one, so that means that is a backup for Charles in this base. And there's this blue one that is very bulky. I want to say that's the one that Charles uses in the comics when he's out in the field and in a fight. It's very bulky. It's very almost like a small tank, right? But it's only a little bit bigger than the gold hover chair, but it's blue, and both of those are in there. We actually get to see Wolverine's Harley. We actually get to see two bikes for Wolverine. We actually get to see the one with the flames on it from the original animated series, but we actually get to see another one that's red and gold, and that is Wolverine's bike from the toy line. I mean, complete with the claws coming off the front of it, and the toy itself had Wolverine's face on the thing. Just pull it back and shoot it, and basically Wolverine riding off in the battle, not just on the bike, but as the bike itself. It's a weird toy. Toys in the 80s and 90s were weird, but coming from a guy who played with all those toys, I'm actually happy to see it because I love those toys. Those toys were a ton of fun. We actually get to see Rogue's red convertible car from the original series too, but this one, the top is up, so it's red with a little like a soft convertible top, and it's kind of tan color. So if you go back and look, you'll see that. We actually get to see Wolverine's that Harley is from X-Men Evolutions, by the way. I almost forgot that. We actually also see over in the corner by Wolverine's Harley is this dirt bike that the other members in X-Men Evolution would ride from time to time. There are all these old X-Men uniforms hanging around this hangar on Muir Island as well. We get to see the same uniform that Storm is wearing now, the black one. It's hanging inside of a case. Now, obviously, this is her original uniform from the original comics. We get to see Cyclops and Jean's secondary costumes, not their original ones, because their original ones look very different. Their original ones are the ones that are in the picture that are hanging up with like Beast and a couple of the other original X-Men team with Charles in the picture. This is their secondary uniform, the gold and blue ones, the very, very rigid univisor for Cyclops, and the winged mask for Jean when she was Marvel Girl. Those two uniforms, so those are their second uniforms. Those are hanging in the case alongside Storm's. We actually also get to see Wolverine's yellow and brown, which he actually gets to wear in this one. We actually get to see Xavier's green jumpsuit that he wore in the original series. Now his original battle jumpsuit, when he was able to walk for a little while in the original comic book, it wasn't green. It was gold and white, and I think this green one from the series looks way better. The original comic book one was a little bit too futuristic, let's say. Right, and we actually get all the way at the end. We get to see Morph's uniform, but we only see it for a split second, but he does wind up wearing it later on. It has these really big shoulder pads from when he was usually wearing a cape in the comic book run, which is very reminiscent of when they actually moved him from the TV show into the comics. Now remember, Morph was never in the comics until after the show. He was created in the show specifically to be killed to draw an emotional response from the people watching it, so they didn't have to have to kill any of the original members of the X-Men, but they wind up bringing them back because so many people were just so sad and wanted to see Morph come back, which actually turned into a damn good storyline because it helped further Mr. Sinister's character along inside of the series. In that same scene, Scott tosses Cable a blue and gold uniform, and Cable says, what am I supposed to wear? What am I, headed to the circus? Scott turns around to him and tells him, like, hey, what do you expect? Black leather. Now, this is a direct shot back at the old Bryan Singer films where they all take off in the Blackbird jet to go confront Magneto on the Statue of Liberty. Wolverine says, you guys actually go out in these black suits. And Scott says, well, yeah, what do you expect? Yellow spandex. And for 24, 25 years, so many people have wanted to see Wolverine and all the other X-Men, honestly, in their original costumes. And now we're actually going to see it. We're going to see Wolverine in his gold and blue inside of Deadpool when it comes out. And now we see all of the other X-Men in theirs inside of this series. So it's actually good to see all of these older costumes actually find the light of day, find purchase, and actually get to see them out in the blue. Bryan Singer didn't even want to use any of the old X. He wanted any of the old X-Men uniforms. He wanted to distance as far away from the old cartoons and the comic books as he possibly could. He even banned people having X-Men comics on set because he didn't even want anybody getting the idea of trying to like sneak in Easter eggs or anything like that from the comics. So that was a very bad idea, because as much as I like the original comics, I do like some of the old uniforms. I don't want to see Wolverine's mask in the live action movies, but the uniform, I'm all for. But that's just me. That's just me. Up next, when they are talking and when Professor X is trying to monologue to President Kelly inside of that meeting he's having with him on the psychic plane, we get to see the other X-Men starting to gear up. And at one point, Jubilee has a card. It's the one that she got from Sunspot, from Roberto, and with his name and his address on it. And she burns it. Now, before it gets burned up, we actually get a glimpse of a couple of things on it. Now, number one, there's a phone number on it, 00907-1982. Now, that is 9/7/1982. It's the date. Now, that's two things. Number one, it's Bo DeMaio's birthday. So now if you wanted to know his birthday, now you got it. They actually stuck it in as an Easter egg. But that's also the same day that we got the release of the Marvel graphic novel number 4, The New Mutants, which is famous for the first appearance of Sunspot, which is where he came from. But also on there, the address is 1 Claremont Drive. Now, that is a direct reference to Chris Claremont, who has done, I'm not going to say all, but the vast majority of the most influential and the most important and the most well-known X-Men stories. It came out of the mind of Chris Claremont. So they got a ton of Easter eggs with him throughout this entire series. And so does with Bo DeMaio. So obviously, he deserves it. Both of those men deserve it. We already talked about Morph's new suit. The fact that he didn't have his cape on, I guess they actually got to talk to Edna Mode from The Incredible. No capes. So next, we actually get the best dialogue in the series. To me personally, this is just my call. When Jean decides that, hey, me and Forge are going to stay up here and fight off all these flying around Sentinels when they attack the Galapagos Islands. You guys head down to the island and start the assault. Jean rushes to her side, and Storm starts this monologue about how, like, hey, you don't have to worry about me. Just like I know how strong you are, and you should know how strong I am by now, right? And she tells her point blank, she's like, I've seen you fight back. I've seen you basically resurrect yourself like a phoenix. That's a direct reference to the fact that Jean used to the Phoenix Force used to inhabit Jean in the old series, and I think we're actually going to go back to that at some point in the next season, but we're going to get to that in a few minutes. And then as they part, the last thing they say to each other, and I made sure I wrote this down so I can get it perfectly because it is such a beautiful line. Jean, they put their heads together almost in a touching moment, and Jean says to Storm, "Make them weather your mind, sister." And Storm replies, no, said make. No, hold on, let me get it right. It says, Jean said, "Make them mind your weather." sister. And Storm replies, and them weather your mind. And I know that is about as cheesy of a line as you can possibly add, but to me, that is a fantastic line. Sometimes the cheesy things work if they're delivered in a serious tone. And for them, that is about as serious as they get. Those two characters within this series, especially, they're very close. They are truly sisters. Even though Storm was with Madeline for the longest time, Jean has now embraced everything about Madeline, and with Madeline being killed on Genosha, everything that was Madeline has now basically been slammed into Jean. So both of those two personalities and everything, all those memories, they all inhabit one person now. So that connection between Jean and Storm, even from the old series and into this one, all that's still encapsulated right here. Like I said, it's a cheesy line. I'm not saying it's not cheesy. Still a perfect line. I don't care what nobody say. It is the absolute best dialogue we've had on this on this series so far. Once they're down on the island, Go Team finds this abandoned town. It is built to look exactly like Bastion's hometown in Indiana. And there's this restaurant that's obviously abandoned. It says DeMayo's Diner. That's obviously a reference to showrunner Bo DeMayo. A thing about that to me is with all these references to him, it's all over the series. As well received as this series has been, whatever he did had to be almost criminal, or just the thought of what he might be up to could lead to some sort of criminal indictment. That's the only way Disney would have got rid of him. That's what I'm starting to think. But if that's the case, where's the arrest? Where is the evidence that he's done something? They're going to have to bring him back, because if it's not him or somebody that has worked one-on-one with him, and I don't think there has been anybody, there's going to be a serious drop off in quality over the run of this, and it's going to piss people off. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. We will talk about that at another day. While they're down on the island, Cable is wind up being manipulated by Sinister, and he forces Cable to attack Jean. Now, two things about that. Number one, it is very much in the comic that Cable is a very strong telekinetic, just like his mother, just like Madeline, just like Jean. They're very strong telekinetics, but he doesn't actually ever use his power, but maybe once or twice in the comics. We don't see it very often because what most people don't know is in the comics, when the comics does explain, his telekinetic powers are almost always at use, trying to keep that techno-organic virus within him in check. Right. So he doesn't actually ever use his telekinetic powers, which is why he winds up using all this future tech and all these other weapons, guns and whatnot within a fight. But he is a very strong telekinetic. He is just about as strong as Madeline and almost as strong as Jean. So the fact that he's throwing this full on attack power right at Jean, and it almost overwhelms her, which a lot of people believe that she was killed in this attack. I don't. Like I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to wind up having this particular attack, this point in time, be what happens to bring Jean back to the Phoenix Force, or the Phoenix Force back to Jean, or vice versa. I think this attack is going to do it. I don't believe that Jean is dead. They aren't going to kill two X-Men in one season. That's just not something we're going to see. Now, that attack that he throws, that kind of reddish beam that filters out through the air and is just covering pretty much every ounce of the screen as we're watching it happen. It is very reminiscent of him being in Marvel Capcom 2 when he pulls out the big plasma rifle and fires the beam, and it covers pretty much the entire screen when you're watching it being fired. So a lot of video game references. The costume that he was wearing that Cyclops threw him earlier is his costume that we actually see from the comics, but it's more so from the one from Marvel versus Capcom 2. So like I said, video game references and all the other references are just plentiful. They are everywhere. The last thing we actually see in this episode, I did not believe I would actually see at any point, like I said, either in TV show or in the comics. At no point did I ever actually believe that they would actually adapt this into a TV show or a movie. But the last thing we see after Wolverine stabs Magneto in order to keep him from attacking Charles any further is Magneto ripping the very adamantium from the bones of Wolverine and laying him to waste. The steel frame of it right back, right at the end, looks very much like the exact steel frame that covered an entire page from the comic. It is one of the most beautiful things I've actually ever seen in this show, and one of the most beautiful things I've actually ever seen so in the entire MCU. Like I said, I never thought that they would actually adapt that because it was such a pivotal moment and it was so violent with even within the realm of the comic. I never thought that they would actually do it, especially for something that's on Disney Plus. But they did it. And I absolutely love it. In the comic, like I said, this actually happens. I want to say it's a year or so worth of comics, maybe a little bit more, where Wolverine does not have any adamantium in his bones. But the good thing about that is now his healing factor is accelerated even further than it already is. Now remember, the adamantium being added to his bones, it's the only reason it works on him is because he has an accelerated healing factor. Same thing with Sabretooth. Sabretooth that actually does have adamantium bonded to his bones too, and I'll tell you why in a second. When Wolverine is running around with just the bone claws, right? We actually see that in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 as well. Another video game reference. There's two different versions of Wolverine you can wind up using. It is the regular Wolverine, and then there is Bone Claw Wolverine. Bone Claw Wolverine heals faster, just like in the comics, because without the adamantium being bonded to his bones, his healing factor it does not have anything else in its way to heal Wolverine at a faster clip. So in the comics, Wolverine is very much more vicious. He's more feral, more animalistic without the adamantium. He's very much an uncontrollable beast. That's the one that most people think of when they think of Wolverine, but that comes from a time when he does not have any adamantium in his bones. I can't remember off the top of my head right now if it was Sinister or Apocalypse. I believe it was Apocalypse. In the comic, he took the adamantium out of Sabretooth and bonded it back to Wolverine, which is why even now Wolverine is back to having adamantium on every inch of his bones. So I don't know if they're actually going to do that, but I can't say that they're not going to do it. The fact that they even had this scene having him get it ripped off of him by Magneto. Yeah, you might as well just get to looking and say, if we're not going to have time travel to undo this, then there's a very good chance we're going to see Apocalypse pop up at some point. He's going to co-opt Wolverine to working with him, which in the comics and the original, Wolverine does run off with Apocalypse and becomes the Death Horseman, right, of his four horsemen of Apocalypse. But that is because he got mind controlled, but still. So we may actually see that happen with Apocalypse putting the adamantium back onto Wolverine's bones in the show. But that's a whole different story. When it happens, if it happens, we will see it. We will enjoy it together. Fantastic episode. A couple of notes that I thought that we ought to talk about real quick. When Xavier and Magneto are fighting. At one point, Magneto picks up his helmet and flings it onto Charles's head, and Charles looks up. Now, at that moment, with the helmet on Charles, I think that's the beginning of Onslaught. Now, if you don't know what Onslaught is, within the comics, exactly what's happening in the show, what happened in the comics. And then when Magneto rips the adamantium from Wolverine's bones, Charles is so angry, so full of rage. He unleashes every ounce of psionic power, his mental power at Magneto, and in that rage, their minds kind of collide together, and all the rage from both of them basically create this all new psionic being named Onslaught. Now, it takes the combined might of the X-Men and the Avengers and the Fantastic Four in order to stop Onslaught in the comics. It even takes the Fantastic Four's Reed Richards and Sue Richards' son, Franklin Richards, to basically create a pocket dimension to lock this being away. That's how strong Onslaught is. And I believe Onslaught may be the actual big bad for season 2, because everything that happened at the end of this is creating Onslaught. The fact that helmet is on Magneto, and within the lore, the helmet now, it does actually block Charles's powers, but Magneto was crushing that helmet around his head. So I don't think Charles is able to get it off. at the moment, and that is causing a feedback loop of everything that Magneto and Charles being fed back into Charles's head. So this is going to create onslaught, I believe. So let's just watch and wait and hope and see. Another one, like I said, I don't think Jean's dead. I think we're going to get the Phoenix Force at some point next season. I don't think it's going to be none of that none of Onslaught or the Phoenix in the last episode, that whatsoever. We're going to get all of the loose threads tied up to this one. I'm still trying to figure out where Bishop is. Where is Bishop? We know Cable said that Bishop got ping pong somewhere through time, and he wound up in the future by himself, alone, and he was raised by somebody else, which is probably going to be a future Forge that finds him, pretty much like the original series. And just like the original series, Bishop does get thrown off course by Apocalypse, though, in the corridors of time. He winds up at the center of time on this little island that leads off into every direction through all of time. But that person that he runs into, the little crazy dude, winds up being Immortus, who is Kang the Conqueror, off into the future. So I don't think Kang the Conqueror is too far behind either. Like I said, it may not be in the series, but it's all tying everything together from the MCU and from everything else. And then one more other question that I meant to mention last week. Where is Captain America and his team? Remember when Rogue met him at the cabin? He told her, hey, if you're going to go down there, go look. But I'm just waiting for word. And then I and my team are going to go in and arrest Trask. But, Rogue got down there first. So where is his team and who is his team? His team can't be but one or two entities. It's got to be either S.H.I.E.L.D. or it has to be the Avengers. Where are they at? Right? So whatever's going to happen in the last episode, I'm hoping that we actually get to see Cap show up with a couple of the Avengers. Which ones? I don't know. I'm pretty sure one of them would probably be Hawkeye and Black Widow. But we shall see. We shall see. I don't want to speculate. I can, but I don't want to. I just want to be surprised. Everything that has happened thus far in the series has just... it has lit up that core part of me that was always there whenever I got up on Saturday morning to watch cartoons, or would run home in the afternoons after school and watch cartoons, even when X-Men was in reruns. Every part of this show is just lighting up that core. It's just firing everything. And I am just in absolute awe of it. So to everybody involved, thank you very much for this show. It is an absolute hit. I can't wait to get more. So, just next Wednesday can't get here fast enough. I don't want to rush the days of our lives, but this show needs to come on because I need that last episode very much. We're going to step aside, and when we come back, it'll be time for the last call. So that's it, and that's all. It's time for the last call. I want to thank each and every single one of you for tuning in this week. You did not have to be here. You did not have to come and hang out with me while I do this pokey little podcast, but you did, and I am truly grateful to every single person. 1, 5, 10, 100, or 1,000 of you. I don't care. I truly appreciate everybody that stops by and decides to hang out with me while I do this. Real quick note before we go. Actually, a couple of things. So the first thing, I totally forgot. There was a tweet after this last episode of X-Men 97 from Bo DeMayo himself, where somebody was asking, well, how are we going to end this if we're not going to do time travel? How are you going to end this show and bring everybody back and get everything moving on toward the second season? He tweeted back to the guy who asked him the question with a picture. It was the Starship Enterprise with the title Cause and Effect. Now, I know this episode because I'm a Trekkie, right? I know exactly what happens in this episode, where what happens is the Enterprise gets caught in a time loop, and the only way out of it is for them to continuously send messages to themselves that only Data winds up finding at the last second in order to snatch them out of this time loop. Now, the funny thing about this episode is, number one, it talks about and stretches about the idea of deja vu, right? So what's going to happen within this next episode? Now, within that episode, the ship that the Enterprise keeps colliding with to blow up, the captain that's flying, that's in control of the other ship, is played by Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer obviously is known for playing Beast in the earlier in the X-Men movies. And Patrick Stewart, who was Captain Picard, obviously played Professor Xavier in the other X-Men movies. So Bo the Mayo knows something we don't. Obviously, he knows something we don't because it is his show that he's running, or was running, I should say. So I would suggest everybody go and watch that episode. It's Star Trek Generation. I can't remember which season, but the title of that episode is Cause and Effect. It was a very good episode. You'll know it. They're in the middle of a poker game when the show starts, but I know it off the top of my head. So if they're going to do anything in that show to land this ship next week, no pun intended with that, by the way, next week with the next episode, I can't wait to see it. Let's outside of that, let's go right into doing our weekend watch list. It's very short. It's only 2 things and it covers all of our bases. Our film pick and our nostalgia pick is one and the same. Harlem Nights, one of the absolute funniest movies I have ever seen in my life. I absolutely love Harlem Nights. I can watch that movie at any given time of the week, any given time of the day. I can quote that movie off the top of my head, and the fact that the parrot keeps calling Vera a certain word is always funny. And if you haven't seen the movie, where the hell have you been? It's been out forever, and it is a fantastically funny movie. You need to watch it. Our series pick and our animation pick is over on Hulu. It's called Copcraft. Now, if you've never seen it, this is a slightly older. I mean, it's not old, but it's not new either. It's 2019 or 2020. It's one or the other. If you ever saw the movie Bright on Netflix, or if you're my age, if you ever saw Alien Nation, this is going to be right up your alley. It's pretty much the same thing. Hard-boiled cop mixed with aliens and fairies and everything else, and they have to take care of this one city in which humans and creatures all kind of live together. But there's always a criminal element that needs to be taken care of, and that's what they do. It looks like a very good series. I didn't watch it. I do know of it, but I never watched it. I am going to watch it this weekend. It's only 12 episodes, and they aren't very long, but looks really good. So maybe next week we'll talk about it, but you never know. That's it for now. It is time to go. I want you to get out there, have a good weekend. I don't know how the weather's going to turn out. It's been a little weird lately. Rain one day, sun the next day, but whatever it is, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Take care of everybody. Stay hydrated, please. Drink your water. Don't get yourself into trouble. Don't hurt yourself. And always remember that you are never alone. If you need somebody to talk to, there's always somebody there to talk to. Pick up the phone, dial or text 988. There is always somebody there to help you through the darkest times. Believe me, I've used it myself in the past. It is always somebody there, and it is a very, very good thing that can help you. It's time for us to go. Just get out there, like I said, have some fun, do something, or just stay in the house and watch anime and read comic books all this weekend, which I just might do. So we shall end this episode the same way we end every episode. God bless, I love you, and peace. See you next time.